Get off my property right now!
Go
I
on,
told
put it
you
in
to
the palm
move!
of your hand. Try to feel the weight of it. You can't, can you? It's too light for everything a person loses in a lifetime. Too thin for 72 years of a man's living. Too small for what a daughter
As you
carries
can
out of a
see, the
lawyer's
total
office
cash
on a March
distribution is
afternoon in East Texas,
$12,000.
with the sun hitting her
That's
face
far
like a
less than we
slap that
expected.
doesn't warm her, just blinds her. I walked out of attorney Irvin Cross's office in Tyler, with that check pinched between two fingers, the way you'd hold a snake that might still bite. My name is Eleanor Whitfield. Everyone who knew me long enough called me Ellie. And that afternoon, standing on the hot concrete outside a lawyer's office in a town I'd driven 40 minutes to reach, I had just become the punchline of my own family. My daddy died 3 weeks before, 72 years old. 3 wives buried, and 1 divorced a man who'd built a small kingdom out of cattle and land, and the kind of stubbornness that skips a generation and lands square on the wrong daughter. My sister Diane took the house in town. My brother Roland took the truck and the savings. My baby sister Kathleen, the youngest, the one Daddy called Sugar. When he thought nobody was listening, she took the family place, all 62 acres of it. The 12 head of cattle, the tractor, the barn my grandfather built with his own 2 hands in 1954. And me, I got $12,000 and a death certificate I didn't ask for. Attorney Cross had slipped it into the envelope himself. Like a man returning wrong change he was too embarrassed to keep. I didn't cry. That part needs to be understood right from the beginning, because there's a certain kind of woman people expect to see crying on the sidewalk outside a lawyer's office. 54 years old, gray hair. I gave up dying about the time Thomas got sick. Hands rough from 22 years of nursing shifts and 4 years of cleaning offices at night after he was gone. People look at a woman like me and they think there's one who cries in the car. I don't, not anymore. I cried when Thomas died. I cried when I buried my mother in a coffin I could barely pay for. I cried the morning my oldest Marlene left for Seattle, without looking back, her whole life packed into a Honda Civic, and her eyes fixed on some horizon I couldn't see. But that afternoon in Tyler, I looked at the check and I looked at the sun and I thought, all right, it's just me now. Diane and Roland had already left before I came out. They didn't wait on the sidewalk, didn't look at me in the hallway, didn't say a word. Kathleen had cried inside the office, the pretty kind of crying, the kind that doesn't smear a woman's makeup. And she'd hugged me on the way out and whispered, I'm sorry, Sissy. It's just how Daddy wanted it. And I'd felt her hand pat my back 3 times the way you pat a dog you're about to leave at the shelter. I drove home to the rented duplex on the edge of Cedar Hollow, with the check in my purse and Jessie in the passenger seat. Jessie is my youngest. 17 years old, hair the color of dark honey, quiet the way his father was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't mean empty. He didn't ask me how much. He didn't have to. He'd seen my face. Mama, he said when we pulled into the driveway. You okay? I'm fine, baby. You don't look fine. I said I'm fine. He nodded the way boys nod when they know they've been shut out, but they love you enough not to push. He got out of the truck and went inside, and I sat there another minute with the engine off, listening to it tick as it cooled. And I thought about my daddy, and I thought about the $12,000, and I thought about the 48 years I'd spent being the daughter who didn't count. Then I saw the sign. It was stapled to the telephone pole across the street. One of those little cardboard signs with a phone number and a photograph taped to the front. For sale by owner, Brooks Place. And underneath someone had written in ballpoint pen, cheap must go. I don't know what made me get out of the truck. I don't know what made me cross the street on foot in my funeral shoes and stand in front of that pole and stare at the photograph until my neck ached from bending. But I did. The house in the photo was falling in on itself. The paint had peeled away in long strips like burnt skin. The roof sagged in the middle the way a chest sags when it's been hit hard. The front gate was a piece of rusted grating tied shut with baling wire. Weeds up to the windows. But behind the house, back behind the ruin, almost sliding out of the frame, there was an oak tree. I have looked at a lot of trees in my life. I grew up in East Texas. I know what a real oak looks like. This one had a trunk as thick as two men holding hands. Its crown spread out over half the yard, and beneath it the ground looked swept clean, the way a church aisle looks swept clean on Sunday morning. Like even the weeds knew better than to grow there. I can't explain what I felt. I've tried to explain it 100 times since to Jesse, to Caleb, to the few people who've earned the right to hear the truth of this story. And every time the words come out wrong. It wasn't reason. It wasn't logic. It was a voice down deep in my chest, quiet but firm, that said this one. I called the number from the last payphone in 3 counties, bolted to the wall of the Chevron, on the edge of Cedar Hollow, like a fossil nobody had the heart to remove. A man answered. His name was John Baxter. Real estate agent, sort of more like a middleman for people who couldn't afford a real one. He was heavy. I could hear it in his breathing. And he was in his truck. I could hear the road. Brooks Place, I said. How much? 11,500, he said. And I'm telling you as a friend, ma'am, that place has been closed up 6 years. The old man died, and the heirs just want shut of it. I'll take it. Close it for 11 there. There was a pause on the line. The kind of pause a man takes when a woman surprises him. You want to see it first. I saw the picture. Ma'am, close it for 11. Caleb drove down from Dallas the next weekend. He is 26 years old, my oldest boy, tall like his daddy, with his daddy's shoulders and my mouth, which is a bad combination for anyone who has to argue with him. He works in insurance. He wears a tie every day. He has become the kind of man his father would have been proud of. And I say that without the smallest scrap of irony, because that's what I raised him to be. He stood in the doorway of the duplex with his suit jacket over his arm and looked at me the way a doctor looks at a patient he's about to give bad news to. Mama, he said, you are buying a ruin. I am buying a piece of land with almost every dollar I have. Mama. He said my name like it was an argument by itself. Mama. Your granddaddy spent 72 years building things. He left me the leftover. What am I supposed to do with the leftover Caleb rent? Another 6 months in this duplex and wait for what? Another inheritance, another man. Another miracle that doesn't come. He was quiet then. He is a smart boy. He knew when he'd lost. Let me at least come with you. The first day, he said. No, Jess is coming. You go back to Dallas. You have a life. You have a life too, Mama. Not yet, I said. And it came out before I could stop it. And it hung there in the small, dim front room of that duplex like a thing I had said out loud that I had only meant to think. Not yet. But I'm going to. He drove back to Dallas that night. He didn't hug me before he left. He was too angry. But he called from the road at 10 o'clock and asked if I'd eaten. And I told him I had. And neither one of us said I love you because we don't have to. He is his father's son, and I am his mother. And there are some things that don't need saying out loud between people who have watched each other bury a man they both loved. Jesse and I loaded the truck the next Saturday. We didn't have much. 2 mattresses, a card table, 4 folding chairs, a box of dishes that had been my mother's, a cast-iron skillet older than I am, Thomas's toolbox still with his name written on the side in black marker in his own hand. I hadn't touched that toolbox in 4 years. I put it in the truck bed, and I did not look at it again. The dirt road started 20 miles past the last stretch of pavement outside Cedar Hollow. John Baxter drove ahead in his F-150, red dust boiling up behind his tires and coming in through the vents of my old Ford until Jesse and I were both coughing. On either side of the road, the East Texas scrubland rolled out flat and mean, bull nettles, mesquite trees, cedar posts leaning at broken angles, fire ant mounds, tall as gravestones, scattered across the pastures like the leavings of some army that had passed through and forgotten to bury its dead. It was late March. The winter had barely finished. The ground was still cracked and thirsty from the drought the year before. Dry heat, I thought. Always dry heat. We turned in at a rusted mailbox with no name on it. The driveway was 2 ruts worn into the pasture, curving between a stand of live oaks and a broken-down fence. And then the house came into view. It was worse than the picture. The picture had been kind. The picture had let you imagine that maybe the paint was just weathered, that maybe the roof just needed patching. Up close, the house looked like something that had died standing up. The porch sagged on the left. 2 of the 4 windows were broken. The screen door hung by one hinge. Somebody had spray painted a word on the front wall in blue paint years ago, and time had eaten it down until you couldn't tell what it had said, but you could tell it hadn't been kind. Jesse got out of the truck and stood in the yard and just looked. "Mama," he said, quiet. "I know, baby. This is bad. I know." And then he looked past the house. He looked past the ruin, and I watched his eyes find the oak. It was even bigger than in the photograph. The trunk was the color of storm cloud. The bark was scarred and split in places where lightning had struck it maybe more than once. But the crown was full and green and spread out over the whole back half of the yard like a hand held over a sleeping child. "Mama," Jesse said in a different voice, "that is a real tree." "Yes, it is. How old you reckon?" 200 years, maybe more." He was quiet a long time. And then he said, "All right, Mama. All right. Show me where you want the mattresses." That first night we slept on the floor of the front room with a candle burning in a mason jar, because the power wasn't on yet and wouldn't be for 11 more days. The roof had a hole in it about the size of a dinner plate, right over where I was lying, and I stared up through that hole at the sky and watched the stars come out one at a time in a rectangle of black cut out of the ruined ceiling. The house made sounds all night. A creak in the walls when the wind shifted, something scurrying in the crawl space under the floor, the far-off yipping of coyotes, and under all of it a silence I had not heard in years. Not the silence of an empty room, the silence of a place that had been left alone so long that the land itself had gotten quiet the way an old dog goes quiet when it has stopped waiting for its people to come home. I thought about Thomas. I always think about Thomas when I'm alone in the dark. There is no way to stop it. And after 4 years, I have stopped trying. 22 years of marriage, and there are still things about him I could not have predicted. Could not can't. He is a was now, and I have had to learn the grammar of that. And let me tell you, the grammar of us is a hard language to learn at 50. Aneurysm. That's what the doctor said. Woke up with a headache on a Monday, buried on a Thursday. His whole life, which had been big and loud and full of laughter, gone in 1 week. I promised him at that hospital in that cold white room with the fluorescent light humming above us that I would take care of the boys, that I would hold on, that I would be okay. I held on, but holding on is not the same thing as living. Holding on is just not falling down. Lying on that floor in that ruined house with the East Texas stars burning down through a hole in the ceiling, I felt for the first time in 4 years like maybe I wasn't just holding on. Maybe I was trying something. Maybe I was reaching. I closed my eyes, and I slept harder than I had slept in a long, long time. The first 2 months were a war without gunfire. There is no romance in it. Anybody who tells you there's romance in country living has never woken up at 4 in the morning, with the cold in their bones, walked 200 yards in the dark to a well, with a bucket hauled that bucket back with their hands numb, and then built a fire out of green mesquite, because that was the only wood on the property that hadn't rotted. There is no poetry in that. There is only necessity. There is only the body obeying, because the mind is telling it to. And the mind is telling it to because there is no other choice left. I didn't know how to plant. I didn't know how to raise a chicken. I didn't know how to mend a fence, how to read the soil, how to smell rain coming on the wind. Those things that a countryman and a countrywoman carry in their blood from watching their mama and their daddy do them. I grew up in Cedar Hollow. My daddy was a small businessman. My mama ironed other people's shirts for a living. What I knew how to do was endure. What I knew how to do was swallow hard and keep going. So that's what I did. Jesse complained. He had a right to. 17 is the age for the internet, for friends, for a future being pieced together. It's not the age for hauling water in the dark, but he stayed. I have never forgotten that. My boy stayed. The nearest neighbor was Miss Ruth Calloway. She lived about a mile and a half up the road in a small white house with a screened porch and a yard full of iris beds. She was 70 or thereabouts, small and neat, with white hair pinned up on top of her head in a way that hadn't gone out of style since 1962. She came walking up my driveway on the third day carrying a covered dish that turned out to be pinto beans and cornbread, and stopped at the front gate. She did not come inside the gate. "You the one who bought the Brooks place," she said. It was not a question. "I am. Eleanor Whitfield." She looked me up and down slowly the way an old woman can look you up and down when she has time, and she knows it. "You know how long that place sat closed?" "6 years, they told me." "You know why?" I hesitated. "The realtor said the heirs didn't want it." She made a low sound in her throat. It was not agreement. It was not disagreement. It was the sound old women make when they know more than they are going to say. "Well, beans are still warm." She handed me the dish over the top of the gate. She did not say anything else about the Brooks place. And when I asked her name, she said Ruth Calloway. "You need anything? My house is up the road on the left. But you probably won't." "Why not?" She looked past me at the house at the Oak, and for a second, just a second, her face changed. Not fear, something older than fear, something more like sorry. "Some places don't want help," she said. And she turned around and walked back up the road. It was a Thursday 2 weeks after we moved in that I went back to clear the far end of the property. The brush behind the house had grown up chest high. Bahia grass tangled with greenbrier, a wild fig tree that had grown crooked against the back fence, prickly pear cactus in clumps the size of automobiles. I went in with a machete, thick leather gloves, a straw hat, and Jesse followed me for about 20 minutes before he started inventing reasons to be elsewhere. "Mama, I gotta go check the water tank." "Mama, I think I hear the truck making a noise." "Mama, I'll be right back." And then he was gone, and I was alone in the back brush with the machete making its dull chop against the wet grass and the smell of cut greenery filling my nose and grasshoppers flying up brown around my knees, and once a snake the color of a rope going the other way faster than I could get scared. That's when the machete hit wood. I stopped. I looked down. There was a round cover on the ground, made of thick, dark wooden planks, old, held together with 2 cross pieces of baling wire twisted down over the top. The brush had grown up around it and over it, but not on it. The planks were clean of vegetation, as if something down there did not let anything take root above. I stood there a while looking at it. A well, I thought. A covered well. That was nothing extraordinary. Every old place in this county had a well. But there was something about that cover that kept me standing there longer than I needed to. Maybe it was the wire. The way it was twisted down ends bent inward like closed fingers, more careful than protective. It didn't look like a lid meant to keep animals out. It looked like a lid meant to keep something in. I knelt down. I put my hand on the wood. It was cold. Not cool, cold. The kind of cold you feel at the mouth of a cave. The kind of cold that has no business being under a March sun in East Texas. "Mama!" I stood up fast, my heart in my throat. Jesse was coming through the brush I had cut open. "Mama, I found the shutoff to the tank. We can fix it. Come here." He came. He looked at the cover. He shrugged. "It's a well. Probably dry." "Probably." We both stood there another second. Neither of us said anything. And I don't know why I did what I did next. And I've asked myself since, and I still don't know. I bent down and I put my hand on the wood one more time, and I said quiet, so Jesse wouldn't hear me. "Excuse me." Miss Ruth Calloway came back that evening. I was outside in the yard lighting the kerosene lantern when I heard her footsteps on the drive. The sky over the mesquite was the color of gunmetal. There was that heavy, sweet smell in the air that comes before rain in this country. And the light had gone the color of pewter. She came through the gate this time. She sat down on the little wooden bench I had set up in the yard under the oak. For a long while, neither of us said anything. I like that kind of silence. The silence of people who don't need to fill the air with words to know they are with each other. Then I said, because I could not say it, "Miss Ruth, the old man Brooks, how did he die?" She did not answer right away. She looked out at the horizon where the lightning was starting to walk sideways along the tops of the trees, still without thunder. He got old, she said. He was 81 when he passed, but his boys didn't stay.
Why not?
She smoothed her skirt across her knees, slow thinking. That place has a history, Eleanor. Every place has a history. This one has more. She stopped there. And I had already learned in those 2 weeks of neighborly visits that Ruth Calloway was not a woman you could push. What she was going to tell you, she told. What she wasn't, you could not pry out of her with a crowbar. We sat a while longer. The first drops of rain started coming down on the tin roof of the porch. She stood up. She picked up the empty dish I had washed and returned to her, and she started walking toward the gate. She was already halfway there when she stopped. She did not turn around. "You found the well out back," she said. My heart gave one hard knock. I found it. "Don't open it, Eleanor." And she walked out through the gate and up the road, her small figure disappearing into the dark, before I could ask her a single thing. I stood there holding the lantern. The flame guttered in the wind that came before the rain. I looked toward the back of the property, where the tall grass hid the round cover with the crossed wire, and I felt something in my chest that I had not felt in a very long time. It wasn't fear. Not yet. It was the feeling of standing at the edge of a story that had started long before I ever heard of it. The storm hit hard that night. I lay on the mattress in the front room, with Jessie asleep in the other room, and I listened to the rain on the roof coming through the patched places, forming a puddle in the corner. The candle had burned out. The dark pressed down on my chest like a hand. And then, over the sound of the rain, I heard something else. It came from the back of the property. It was hard to describe. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't an animal. It was more like the sound an old pipe makes when water is pushing through it. A low, hollow moan, off and on, off and on. I sat up on the mattress. I did not move for a long time. I just sat and listened. It could have been the wind in the boards of the cover. It could have been groundwater rising with the storm. It could have been any simple, ordinary, sensible thing. But at 3 in the morning in a house I barely knew in the dark, with the rain coming down and the candle out, no simple, sensible thing could get its feet under it. The sound stopped. I lay back down. I did not sleep the rest of that night. In the morning, the storm had blown through, and the sun came up on a world that smelled like clean earth, and something older than clean earth. The birds were loud. I put my boots on, and I walked back through the wet grass to the well. The cover was exactly where I had left it. The crossed wire, the dark planks, everything the same. But in the mud around the cover, there were footprints. They were not animal. They were human. They were small. They were bare feet, a child's feet. And they came from nowhere. And they went nowhere. They walked in a circle, round and round the well cover in the mud, as if some small child in the middle of the storm, in the middle of the night, had walked in a slow circle around that cover, without ever entering the yard from the road, and without ever leaving it. I stood there a long time, looking at those prints. The wind moved the tall grass. Somewhere behind me, a mourning dove called that long, low, sad note that sounds like a woman remembering something she has tried to forget. And I thought, standing in the wet grass with the sun coming up, and my own boots making the only other prints in the mud, there is something here I do not understand yet. But I am going to. I stopped counting the days. Anybody who starts counting the days in a hard place will lose themselves in the counting. You wake up thinking it's been 40 days now. It's been 2 months. And then the time turns into weight, into a bill coming due, into that voice that asks, well, any better yet? And when the answer is no, when the beans are still thin and the fence is still down and the money still going out faster than it's coming in, that voice becomes the worst enemy a woman can have. So I stopped counting. I lived by the task. Today, clean the chicken coop that doesn't exist yet but is going to. Tomorrow, plant the collard starts Miss Ruth brought over. The day after that, fix the gate that grinds every time the wind comes out of the north, task by task, day by day, without looking too far ahead. The neighbor who came and taught me the land was named Walter Boone. He was somewhere between 60 and 70, hard to tell. thin as a fence post in a faded gray Stetson. I never saw him take off. Not when he came inside. Not when he said grace before he ate. Not in the rain. He showed up one morning without warning. Walked over to my raggedy row of tomato starts and stood there looking at them without saying a word for 2 full minutes. You planted in the wrong direction, ma'am. How's that? Sun comes up over there. He pointed east with one long finger. You planted with your back to it. Your seedling's gonna grow crooked trying to turn around. I tried not to let it show that it stung. What do? Pull 'em up, plant 'em again. I did. Walter stood watching. He gave a few more pointers. He left without asking for anything. And he came back the next week with a sack of composted manure that smelled so strong. Jesse walked to the other end of the property and stayed there an hour. Nobody survives alone out here. Walter said that day, spreading the compost with an old hoe he had brought with him. He said it plain, without a sermon, without a speech, like a man noting the weather. I heard it, and I kept it. That kind of sentence from that kind of man is usually the truest thing you'll hear all week. The chickens came before anything else. 6 of them. 3 red hens and 3 barred rock that Walter got from somebody he knew and brought over in a wooden crate one Saturday afternoon. Jesse looked at them like they were animals from another planet. I had never handled a chicken in my life. I knew they laid eggs. I knew you ate them. What went on in between, I had no idea. I learned that chickens have personalities. There's the bossy one. There's the scared one. There's the one that stays by herself in the corner, and you never quite know what she's thinking. I learned that when a chicken goes quiet, it's a bad sign. Either she's sick or she's afraid of something. I learned to read the signs of those birds before I ever learned to read the signs of the land. The first eggs came on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks in. I was sweeping the yard when Jesse hollered from the coop. I ran. My heart was in my throat, thinking snake sickness something. I got there with my broom still in my hand. He was holding one small egg, the color of sand, still warm. Mama, look. I took the egg with both hands. That small warmth, that plain, simple, almost nothing. I hadn't expected it to hit me the way it did. I had to turn my head so Jesse wouldn't see my eyes wet because a chicken egg is a foolish thing to cry over. I know that. But in that moment, it was proof that something on this land was working, was alive, was answering. The land is listening, I thought. The land is listening, and it's answering. I let the well alone. Those child's footprints I saw the morning after the storm, I thought about them for days. I came to the most reasonable conclusion I could find. Some kid from a neighbor's place must have come through the property that night. Kids walk at night in the country. It's not the same as the city where it scares people. Must have slipped through the back fence, walked around the well out of curiosity and gone home. That made sense. I told myself that. I almost believed it. Almost. Because a week after the storm, on a clear night with a full moon, I got up to go to the outhouse in the small hours, and I looked toward the back of the property, and I swear to God I saw a light, small, flickering, in the middle of the dark brush, right where the well was. It blinked 3 times and went out. I stood there in my nightgown in the cold with my heart beating out of rhythm, waiting to see it again. I did not see it again. Just the dark brush and the moon-white sky and that pressing silence that always sits on that piece of land. I went back inside. I did not tell Jesse. I did not tell anybody. It was a Wednesday with the sun already up, and me packing lunch pails for a construction crew on the county road. When I heard the front gate creak, I looked up. I stopped. 2 children were standing there. Standing. Not leaning against the gate, not playing, not looking around. Standing. Like children who were waiting for permission just to exist in that space. The taller one was maybe 9 years old. Her hair was light brown and tangled blouse, a washed-out blue jeans that were too short at the ankles. She looked at me with a seriousness a child ought not to have. That kind of look you recognize because you've seen it in county shelter lines and in the waiting room at the free clinic. The look of someone who learned early that the world doesn't give anything away. The smaller one was behind her. Even smaller than I thought at first, 6 maybe. Her hair was in a braid on one side, and on the other side it was loose and knotted, as if somebody had started to comb it and given up in the middle. She was holding onto the hem of her sister's blouse, not with her whole hand, just 2 fingers, but so tight her knuckles were white. They didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. For a moment we just looked at each other. The sun came in from the side and made long shadows on the red dirt. A cicada screamed somewhere far off. The wind moved in the tall grass. And then I saw what I needed to see. I didn't see hunger in their eyes. Hunger, I know. I've been there. What I saw was different. It was the state that comes after hunger, when the body has gotten used to going without and the person stops feeling any urgency about it. A quiet empty, a resignation that has no age. Those girls have already given up asking, I thought. They are here, but they are already waiting for me to say no. I did not put down the lunch pail. What are your names, sweetheart? The taller one answered. Her voice was firm but low. Maddie. The smaller one didn't answer. She just tightened her 2 fingers on her sister's blouse. The taller one nodded at her. She's Susanna. We call her Susie. Where'd y'all come from? Maddie pointed vaguely toward the road in the direction of the creek. On the other side, there were a handful of houses I barely knew about. 6 or 7 of them scattered through the brush. I had driven past once and seen clothes on a line and a television glowing through a screen door. Where's your mama? A pause. At home. I knew that pause carried more than would ever be said. I had learned not to press that kind of pause. Whoever has to talk talks when they're ready. I went into the kitchen. I heated up what I had. Rice, black beans, a piece of squash I had cooked that morning. I put it into a lunch tin with 2 forks. I brought it back out. Sit over there. I nodded to the little wooden bench under the oak. They looked at each other. Maddie decided first. She walked over and sat down. Susie followed, glued to her. I set the tin in front of them with the forks. They ate slow. That marked me. The way they ate. It wasn't the hurry of hunger. It was a slow, almost ceremonial thing, as if each bite had to be made to last as long as possible. As if they knew from experience they didn't know when the next one was coming. I swept the yard on the other side, pretending not to watch. But I watched. They came back the next day. Same time, same gate, same silence. And the day after. And on the 4th day, I was ready. I had made extra food on purpose without admitting to myself that I was expecting them. When I heard the gate creak, I made my face look surprised, but my heart didn't fake it. It gave that hot little knock in the chest of someone who is recognizing something that needed to arrive. It was on the 5th visit that the thing happened that changed everything. Susie, who up until then had not said a single word to me, was sitting under the oak eating, and she raised her eyes from her plate and pointed toward the back of the property. I looked. There was nothing there. Just brush. Just the tall grass moving. What is it, Susie? She didn't answer. She kept pointing. Maddie stopped eating and looked at her sister. She said, quiet, Susie, in a tone that wasn't a child calling to another child. It was almost the tone of an adult calming someone. Susie, come on now. Susie lowered her hand. She looked at her plate. But before she looked down, I saw her face. It was not curiosity. It was recognition. Like someone who is seeing something they have already seen before. I looked again toward the back of the property, toward the closed brush, toward the place where the wooden cover with the crossed wire lay. Maddie, I said carefully, did y'all know this place before? Did y'all know the old man who lived here? The child was silent for a long moment. Then she said, not looking at me, my grandma did. She was his friend. Pause. She worked here. And she wouldn't say any more. That night, with the waning moon and the sky heavy with stars that the city never lets a person see, I sat out in the yard after Jessie had gone to sleep. I had a weak cup of coffee going cold in my hand. I was thinking. There was a history at that place I did not know. There was a history in those girls they weren't telling. And there was a covered well in the back of the property that everybody around it seemed to know about. And nobody wanted to say. I am not a woman of fear. I raised 2 boys mostly by myself. I buried a husband. I lost an inheritance. I bought a ruin and made it a beginning. Fear, I know. I have been afraid of not being able to pay a bill, of losing a child to sickness, of getting old without anyone by my side. That kind of fear I know how to carry. But what I was feeling that night was different. It was the feeling of standing in the middle of a story that was already being told before I got here. And I had walked into it without knowing. I took the last sip of the cold coffee. I looked at the dark back of the property, and I said out loud to nobody who was awake, only to myself and to the dark and to the land that was listening. If y'all want to stay, I said, y'all can work with me. The wind stopped for a second, like it had heard. Maddie and Susie stayed, not all at once, not with a suitcase and a document and a grown-up conversation. They stayed the way a poor child stays in a place by degrees, out of necessity, without anybody having to formalize a thing, because everybody knows that formalizing costs and takes time. And meanwhile, the child is hungry now. The first week they came and went, arrived in the morning, worked a little, ate, left before dark. The second week, Susie started staying later. She played with Jesse, who grumbled about it but liked it, and I saw it in the way he laughed when he thought I wasn't looking. The third week, on a night of hard rain, they simply didn't leave. I didn't ask. I made up 2 cots in the small room at the back of the house. The room I had been calling the storage room, because it was still full of the rusted tools left behind by old Harlan Brooks. And I said, that room is y'all's for as long as y'all need it. Maddie looked at me with that heavy seriousness of a child grown old too soon. We're gonna work, she said, not as a question, as a bargain. It's not a favor. It took me a second to understand what she was saying. When I understood, I felt it land in my chest with force. It's not a favor, I confirmed. It's work. She nodded. She took Susie's hand. They went to the room. Jesse appeared at my side, looking at me. Mama, it's gonna get hard. It's already hard. It's gonna get harder. I know. He looked at me a moment longer. Then he walked away, shaking his head with that way of a young man who disagrees but knows he can't change anything. I stood alone in the dark hallway, listening to the rain on the roof. Thomas, I thought, like I always do when I make a big decision, you would have done the same thing. You were better at this than I was. At opening the door, I was always more of a closer, but I'm trying. 2 mornings later, I put my hand on the well cover in the back, and I knew. It wasn't a decision I made all at once. It came in the way big decisions come to women my age. Slow, certain, without theatrics. I was going to open it, not that day, but soon. I needed to know what everybody around me knew. That week I worked like I had never worked before. Cleared the whole backyard. Cut the tall grass around the well until there was maybe 15 feet of clean ground around the cover. Drove into Tyler and bought a good rope at the hardware store. Thick, 30 feet. The kind that will hold weight without giving. Brought back a metal bucket, a new flashlight with new batteries, rubber gloves. Jesse saw me come in with all of it, and he stood there looking at me. Mama, what are you fixing to do? I'm going down in the well. Silence. No, he said. Mama, no. He came at me and took the rope out of my hands. Not with violence. With that contained desperation of a boy who is trying to protect his mama and doesn't know how. You are not going down a 13-foot well alone, not knowing what's in it. I'm not going alone. With who? With Becca. Who's Becca? The girl's mama. He kept looking at me. And she is going down there to do what? She's going to see what she needs to see. That isn't an answer. It's the answer I've got. We stood there looking at each other. My 17-year-old son, with his father's eyes, the same crease his father had between his eyebrows when he was worried and didn't want to show it. I felt the old catch in my chest. The missing that isn't for a specific moment. It's for a presence. For having someone at your side who knew you from the inside. You are going to hold the rope, I said, softer. I need you for that. I'm not going down without somebody holding it from up top. He looked down. He gave me the rope back. Fine, he said in the voice of a boy trying to sound put out and not quite managing to hide the relief of at least being included. But if anything happens, you pull. Simple as that. Simple as that. I sent word to Becca with Maddie the next morning. 3 words on a folded piece of paper. Saturday, early, Kami. Maddie came back that afternoon with 3 words on the same paper. I'll be there. Thank you. But before Saturday, I had one more thing to do. I walked to the creek and I crossed it. 40 minutes on foot. Maddie led me the first time, but that day I went alone. Down the steep bank through the tall grass that cuts your legs if you don't pay attention. Through the thick cedar brake where the twisted trees make wet dark shade even under a hard sun. Across the crossing of stones on the creek. The water at ankle height brown with clay. Running with the hurry of water that has somewhere to be. On the other side the ground climbed again. The trees opened and there in the middle of a swept dirt yard ringed on 3 sides by brush. And on the 4th by a smaller live oak was a small house. Bare brick, no siding, tin roof with rocks on top, so it wouldn't blow off in the wind. 1 window on the side, 1 door in the middle, a clothesline with faded laundry pulled tight between 2 posts. Beside the house, a brick fire pit with a pot on it and thin smoke going up. A woman was sitting on a wooden bench outside. She saw me before I got to her. She stood still, hands in her lap. She watched me approach with an expression it took me a while to identify. It wasn't suspicion. It wasn't anger. It was anticipation. The state of somebody who has been waiting for a piece of news for so long that when it finally shows up in the shape of a person walking toward her, the body doesn't quite know what to do. She was in her early 40s, younger than I expected, and older too. Skin lined by sun and by care, hair pulled back with a rubber band. A long-sleeve shirt in spite of the heat. Eyes deep set the same shape as Maddie's eyes. Thin the way a person gets who works too much and eats too little and doesn't complain because complaining spends energy she doesn't have. You're the one bought the Brooks place. I am. Eleanor Whitfield. Becca Hollis. She nodded at the bench across from her. Sat down. I did. For a while, neither of us said anything. The smoke from the fire went up slow. A chicken loose in the yard looked at me with that dumb, indifferent look chickens have and walked off. She's gone, Becca said without preamble, without me having to ask. As if the conversation had started inside her before I even got there. Maddie tell you something. Some things? What did she tell you? That your mama went missing in 1987. That Brooke said she left. That you never believed it. Becca looked at the fire a long moment. My mama did not leave. Her voice was level, no tremor. That same voice Maddie had. I understood now where it came from. My mama was a woman that did not go anywhere without telling me. She'd drop me at the neighbor's. She'd say, Becca, I'm going to town. I'll be back tomorrow. Always told me. Always. How old were you? 6, same age as Susie. I marked that, and I kept it. And Brooke said she left. Brooke said she asked for her wages on a Friday and left Saturday morning before anybody was up. Becca paused. My mama did not walk out that door before she had fixed me breakfast. Not since I was born. She never once let me wake up without something on the table. Not one time. The sun beat on the yard. Susie had fallen asleep in her mother's lap, that easy way small children sleep anywhere when they feel safe. Becca ran her hand slow over the girl's hair. Did you look for her? I asked. When you were grown. I looked where I could. I asked in Tyler. In Nacogdoches. In the places she had folks. Nobody knew nothing. Gone. Pause. And I grew up thinking maybe I'd done something wrong. Maybe she really did leave. Maybe I wasn't reason enough for her to stay. She said it without drama, without tears, in the most broken way there is. The voice of somebody who accepted a pain without ever getting to resolve it. Becca. I took a breath. There's a name carved on the wall of that well. She closed her eyes. She just closed them. She stayed like that for maybe 5 seconds. When she opened them, there was water in them. She did not let it fall. I know she said. My mama told me she was going to. The last time I talked to her. The Thursday before she disappeared. She was different. Quiet. Scared of something I didn't understand. She sat me in her lap and held me longer than usual, and she said, Becca, whatever happens, your mama's name is going to be somewhere that don't wash away. You understand? I nodded. I was 6. I didn't understand, but I kept it. She opened her eyes. I only understood when I got grown. We sat a long while. The fire crackled. A cicada started up somewhere close. Becca, do you think Brooks did something to her? The woman didn't answer right away. She looked at the fire, then at me with those deep-set eyes of a daughter of a missing woman. I have no proof of anything, Eleanor, she said, slow. Never had. That's why I never went to the law. That's why I never did anything but ask and not find. Pause. But I know what I know. What do you know? My mama was afraid of Brooks. She spoke low when she said his name. A few weeks before she disappeared, she came home one day with a mark on her arm and said she'd hit the corner of the sink. She looked at me. The corner of the sink. Fingerprints. Eleanor. The air went heavy. I heard the insects. I heard the fire. I heard my own heart in my ears. What do you want me to do, Becca? She thought for a long time. I don't want the law, she said. Brooks is dead. His boys are gone. There is no case to make. There is nobody left to pay for it in this world. Pause. What I want is to know. Know what? If she's down there. I heard it. And something inside me that had been tight since morning got tighter because I understood what she was asking. She was not asking me to call the sheriff. She was not asking for investigation, for court, for justice. Things she knew never come for a woman of her kind, of her means, with her story. She was asking me to go down that well. Becca, this needs to be done right. I know. I don't mean tonight. I know. She looked at me. I'm not asking you to do it today. I'm not asking you to do it alone. I'm asking you when you are ready, if you are to call me. And I'll go with you. Pause. She's my mama. If she's down there, it has to be me that sees her first. I looked at that woman. 37 years she had carried the heaviest doubt a person can carry, whether she was abandoned or whether she lost her mother. And she had never been able to grieve either one all the way because she never had been certain which was true. I thought about Thomas. I thought about how much I had cried when he was taken, and how even with all the pain there was a hard mercy in the clarity of it. I knew what I had lost. I had a date. I had a place. There was a casket and a grave and a preacher and the smell of the candles. This woman had none of that. She only had a name carved in stone at the bottom of a well. All right, I said. When I'm ready, I'll send word. Saturday. Early. We'll go together. Becca did not move for a moment. Then she reached across the space between us and took my hand. Her hand was rougher than mine. She squeezed once. Thank you, Eleanor Whitfield. I walked back to my place alone. The path seemed longer than it had going out. The stones in the creek slicker. The cedar brake closer. The sun heavier on my shoulders. When I got home, Jesse was in the garden. He saw my face and stopped what he was doing. What is it, Mama? Later, baby. Mama, later. I walked around behind the house. I stood at the edge of the covered well. I put my hand on the cold wood. And I thought about Junie Hollis, who I had never met and never would, who was a woman of flesh and blood, who had cooked and washed clothes and raised a daughter, and been afraid and carved her own name into the stone because she knew the name was the only piece of her that had any chance of surviving. Nobody survives alone out here, Walter had said. Number. Nobody does, but sometimes we die alone. And that is the thing that cannot be allowed to stay unspoken. I took my hand off the wood. I looked at the sky. The sun was going down. The light was the color of copper. The oak threw its long shadow across the yard. I'm coming, I said. Not to anybody who was there. To somebody who wasn't. To a name in a wall. I'm almost there. Behind me, the wind moved in the tall grass. And somewhere in the brush, a mourning dove called that long, low note, and the covered well waited the way it had waited for 37 years, patient as any stone. The Saturday of the descent was one day away. Saturday came in gray, not rain, that low ceiling of cloud that East Texas puts up sometimes at the end of a season when the weather doesn't quite know if it's still spring or already summer. The air was damp, heavy, full of the smell of ground that had breathed all night and not dried out yet. Becca showed up before the sun was up over the tree line. I was in the yard with the coffee on the fire when I heard her feet on the road. She came alone. The girl stayed with a neighbor. She was in long pants, an old pair of sneakers, a long-sleeve shirt, hair pulled back tight. Her face was closed, not angry, concentrated. The look of a woman who had spent the whole night getting herself ready for something and had arrived as ready as a person can arrive at a thing like that. We didn't hug. It was not the kind of morning for hugging. We drank coffee in silence. Jesse sat on the step with his cup in both hands like he needed the warmth. When we finished, I stood up. Let's go. The three of us went in a line to the back of the property. Me in front, Becca in the middle. Jesse behind us with the rope coiled on his shoulder. The cut grass made a corridor to the well. The ground was still wet with the night's dew. Our boots left prints. Somewhere out in the brush, a white egret lifted up that slow high heron flight. The neck folded, the big wings sweeping through the gray air. We stood around the cover for a moment. Nobody spoke. I looked at Becca. She was looking at the old wood with an expression I will never be able to describe all the way. It was 37 years in that expression. It was a 6-year-old girl and her mother's coffee and a whole life built on top of a question with no answer. You don't have to go down, I said low. I can go and tell you what I find. No. Firm. No hesitation. I go. I nodded. I started lifting the boards. The old smell came up again. That smell of deep stone, of old water, of stopped time. Becca closed her eyes for a second when it hit her. Just a second. Then she opened them and looked into the dark hole. I tied the rope on the thick trunk of a hackberry that stood about 6 feet away. I tested the knot 3 times. I put my whole weight on it. It held. I gave the other end to Jesse. You stay here. If I pull twice, you haul. Mama. Twice, Jesse. He gripped the rope. His knuckles went white. The way Susie had held on to her sister's blouse. That is how the ones we love hold on when they are afraid of losing us. I got down on the edge of the well, put my gloves on, grabbed the rope, and I started down. 13 feet doesn't sound like much from the top. From the inside, it is another country. The stone wall closing on both sides of me as I went down. The daylight up above getting smaller and farther. The smell getting stronger and older. The rope creaking. My arms burning. I went slow, testing each step. My feet feeling for holds on the uneven rock of the wall. When my boots touched the mud at the bottom, I felt a cold that started at my ankles and went up to the back of my neck. I turned on the flashlight. The space was small. You couldn't stretch your arms all the way out. The water was in the middle. A thin dark trickle covering maybe 2 inches of the ground. The mud below sucked at my boots with a slow, steady pressure. The stone walls around me were covered in wet moss that shone in the flashlight beam. I turned the light on the wall where I had seen the name. Junie, 1987. The letters were deep, cut with something with a point. A nail, a piece of sharpened iron, cut with time and with intention, not hurry. Each letter carefully made within what was possible, as if the person who cut them had known she was doing the most important thing she would ever do. I ran my gloved finger over the letters. Junior. I stayed like that a moment. Then I turned the light on the rest of the wall. And that is when it happened. The second moment of real fear. Not the fear that screams, not the fear that runs, the fear that just stops, the fear that makes the heart beat once hard and then stay quiet waiting. Down in the deepest corner of the well, where the wall met the mud, there was a stone different from the others, flat, wide, set there on purpose. It was not natural rock from the well. It was a stone brought from somewhere else and fit against the wall, covering a space at the base like a small lid, like a seal. Around it the mud was different, darker, more sunken in, as if the weight of that stone had pressed on that corner for a very, very long time. My heart was in my throat. I looked at the stone a long time. I thought about Becca up top. I thought about Junie carving her name careful before something happened. I thought about 37 years of a question without an answer. And I thought, And this was the hardest thought, the one I carry to this day, that sometimes finding the truth doesn't fix anything. Sometimes it only confirms the pain. Sometimes what was buried should have stayed buried, not out of cowardice but out of mercy. But Becca was up there, and she had the right. I hollered up, "Becca, come down." She came down faster than I expected. When her boots hit the mud and the flashlight caught her face, I saw she was pale. Not with fear, with something past fear, something that has no good name. She looked at the letters first. June 1987. She put her hand on the wall, palm flat over the name, fingers in the letters. She stayed like that a long time, eyes closed, breath deep and uneven, the breath of somebody trying not to break. I didn't say anything. When she opened her eyes, I pointed at the corner, at the flat stone. She looked. She understood right away without a word. I saw the understanding land on her face. That small shift, the jaw that tightens, the eyes that go deeper. We stood together looking at the stone. The silence down there was different from any silence I had ever been in. It was the silence of a closed place, layered decade after decade, the same as moss on the wall. "I have to know," Becca said, voice barely a whisper. "I know. Help me." We went together. I held the flashlight. She got down. She put both hands on the flat stone. She pushed. The stone was deep in the mud. It resisted a second, then it gave. That low, wet sound of something releasing. The sound echoed up the walls of the well and out into the gray sky above. Under the stone was dirt. Dark dirt, compacted, different from the mud of the well floor. Nothing else. Becca looked at the dirt. She put her hand in. She dug down. The dirt gave easy. Turned dirt that had been sitting for years. About 4 inches down, her fingers found something. She stopped. Her hand stayed in the dirt for a second that felt much longer. Then she brought it up slow. In her gloved hand was a piece of decomposed cloth. Dark, nearly no shape. But you could still tell what it had been. A piece of cotton fabric that had been blue once, or maybe not blue, some soft color eaten by time until nothing remained. Just fabric. Becca looked at the piece of cloth in her palm a long time, and then finally she cried. It was not a movie cry. It was the cry of a person who has been holding for 37 years and cannot hold anymore. A deep cry, the kind that comes from the bone. No words, no shape to the sound. Just the shaking in her shoulders and the broken breath and the tears that in the dark of the well flashed with the flashlight beam. I held her. I did that without thinking. I put my arms around that woman I barely knew at the bottom of a dark well, and I held her while the years came out of her. Because I understood. I understood with that old piece of cloth that the answer was there. Not complete, not official, not with a name on a warrant and a date on a sentence. But it was there. Junie had not gone away. Junie had carved her name in the wall because she knew what was coming. Or because she wanted somebody someday to know she had been real, that she had been a mother, that she had existed, and Junie had stayed there, in that dark corner of a covered well, while life up top went on as if she had never lived. I held Becca until the shaking in her shoulders slowed, until her breath came back, until the silence of the well returned. Different now, less heavy, as if something had been released. We went up slow. Jesse was on the edge, holding the rope. His face was tight with everything a boy up top imagines can go wrong. When he saw me come up, he breathed out hard. When he saw Becca behind me, her face wet, her eyes red. Her hand closed around the piece of cloth. He did not ask anything. My boy has his father's hands and his father's frown line, but the respectful silence that is his own. The three of us stood around the open well for a while. The sun had broken through the clouds while we were down there. Now it hit the yard with the clean highlight of mid-morning, the kind of light that leaves no shadow, that lights everything from above. Becca looked at the dark hole with the cloth still in her closed hand. "What are you going to do?" I asked. She took a long time to answer. "I'm going to keep this, the hand with the cloth, and I'm going to tell my girls everything, and Brooks, the boys. Brooks is dead." She said it without bitterness. with a flatness harder than anger. His boys are gone. They didn't want any part of this land. This isn't going to court, Eleanor. There is no court left. There is nothing the law will do for a poor woman who went missing in 1987 on a place nobody wants to remember. Pause. But I have to do it in memory, in remembrance. I have to not let her disappear a second time. I nodded. There was a truth in that. It took me time to understand it all the way. Not every debt gets collected in court. Some are collected in silence, in absence, in the forgetting the guilty carry without knowing they carry it. And some get paid not in punishment but in remembrance. In not letting a life go without a trace. Junie had carved her name. We had read it. Maybe that was it. Maybe that was all she needed. I went into town on the Monday and I bought a 50-pound bag of concrete and a piece of pine board. Jessie and I mixed the concrete in an old wheelbarrow and we poured a proper lid over that well. Solid, set, the kind of lid you don't undo. While it was still wet, I asked Maddie to write in her careful hand on the pine board. She was 9 years old and her handwriting was better than mine. She wrote, Junie May Hollis. She lived here. She is not forgotten. We set the board upright at the edge of the new lid. The concrete cured around the base of it. Becca came the day it was finished. She stood in front of the board a long time. Then she turned around to me with a smile that was one of the hardest I ever saw. The kind of smile that only exists when a very old pain has found a place to rest. Thank you. You don't have to. I do. She looked at me. You didn't have to do any of this. You could have covered it back up and pretended you didn't see. I stayed quiet a moment. I've been the leftover my whole life, I said. I have been the one who got what remained after everybody else took the good pieces. Pause. I can't do that to somebody else. I can't look at somebody who was made invisible and pretend I didn't see them. Becca didn't answer, but she looked at me with the look of somebody who understands not with the head but from inside. The car came up my drive on a Tuesday afternoon in July. It was a silver Cadillac. It did not belong on my road. I knew before it stopped who was in it. Diane got out of the passenger side. Roland got out of the driver's. Kathleen got out of the back. My 3 siblings, in their town clothes, standing on my red dirt like they were doing me a favor by being there. I was in the yard hanging wet laundry on the line I had strung between 2 cedar posts. I did not stop hanging. Ellie Diane said. She was wearing sunglasses. She did not take them off. Ellie honey, we heard about the place. What'd you hear? That you'd fixed it up. That it was doing well. She tried to smile. We wanted to come see how you were. I hung up the last shirt. I turned around. I did not walk closer to them. I did not invite them into the yard. I looked at Diane. I looked at Roland. I looked at Kathleen, who was studying the ground because she has always been the coward of the 3. Daddy left me $12,000, I said. Because y'all thought I would disappear quietly. Nobody answered. Y'all took the house. Y'all took the truck. Y'all took the land. And y'all took the last name my mama gave me and rubbed it in the dirt. And now you come out here because you heard from somebody. I've got a garden going and some chickens and a roof I patched with my boy's hands. Diane opened her mouth. I'm not done, I said. And she closed it. That may have been the first time in 54 years that woman closed her mouth because I told her to. I didn't disappear. I am right here. What I have built here, I built with the leftover. And what I have built here is not for sale. And it is not for sharing. And it is not for the 3 of you to come look at like it was some little curiosity. I paused. I made myself breathe. Now go home. Kathleen started to cry. Not the pretty cry, the other kind. The kind I had never seen her do. Roland put his hand on her back and looked at me with a face I could not read and I did not care to read. Diane took her sunglasses off. For a second, I saw the sister I grew up with. Then she put them back on. All right, Ellie. They got in the Cadillac. They turned around in the yard. They drove back down my drive in a plume of red dust. I watched the dust settle. Then I turned around and I finished hanging the laundry, and I did not think about them again for a long time. Caleb called from Dallas that Friday. Mama, he said, Jesse sent me some pictures. Of what? Of the garden, of the chickens, of the tree. I didn't say anything. Mama, I was wrong. I closed my eyes. Can I come this weekend? Yes. Can I bring my toolbox? Yes, baby. He came Saturday morning. He got out of his truck in Dallas clothes and he stood in the yard and he looked at what his mama had built with $12,000 and one 17-year-old boy and a lot of stubbornness. And I saw his face change. I saw him understand. He hugged me. He is not a boy who hugs easy, but he hugged me a long time. Daddy would be proud, he said in my ear. I could not answer that, but I squeezed his hand. And he understood. He and Jesse fixed the roof that weekend. Father and son work only without the father. Two brothers on a ladder. The older one teaching the younger one how to lay the shingle right, how to drive the nail without splitting the wood. I made lemonade. I brought it out to them. I sat under the oak in a folding chair, and I watched my two boys on the roof of my house, and I felt something I had not let myself feel in 4 years. Not happiness, that word is too clean. Something closer to this is enough. John Baxter drove by in October and honked as he passed. He slowed his F-150 by the front gate and took a long look at the pumpkins lined up on the porch rail and the fence Jesse and Caleb had put back straight and the new tin on the roof shining in the late sun. He raised one hand in the air, that country wave that isn't quite a hello and isn't quite a goodbye, and he drove on. He never stopped. He never had to. Some men just want to know a thing turned out. That night I dreamed of Junie. I have never told anybody this except Becca, and now you. I dreamed I was standing at the back of the property, and the well had no lid on it, but I was not afraid. And a woman came walking out of the brush. She was small. She was in a dress the color of a sky at dusk. She had gray hair pulled back. She was not young. She was not old. She was the age a person is when the years stop mattering. She did not speak. She looked at me. And she nodded. That slow nod one woman gives another when there is nothing to say, and everything has already been understood. Then she turned around and she walked back into the brush and she was gone. I woke up. I went outside. The sun was coming up, and there growing at the base of the pine board where Maddie had written Junie's name was a small flower. Purple. Wild. I had never seen one like it on that land. I called Miss Ruth over that afternoon and I showed it to her. She got down on her knees, old as she was, and she looked at it a long time, and when she stood up she was quiet. Miss Ruth, Eleanor, she said, I have lived on this road my whole life. I have never seen that flower grow in this county. I did not say anything. She looked at me. Some things are given, she said, not explained. She patted my hand once. She walked back down the drive to her white house. I did not touch the flower. I let it grow. The pumpkins came in October, the first real harvest. Big orange pumpkins, the kind you could set on a porch and be proud of. We had a supper that night. Everybody came. Caleb drove down from Dallas. Marlene did not come. She was still in Seattle, but she called and she talked to me for an hour. And she cried a little on the phone, and I did not, but I felt the shape of it in my chest. Becca came. Maddie came. Susie came. Walter Boone came in his gray Stetson and would not take it off at the table. Miss Ruth came in a Sunday dress. Even Kathleen showed up, alone, without Diane and Roland. She stood at the gate a long time before she came in. I let her stand. When she came in, she didn't say anything about anything. She just helped me carry the plates out. That was enough. Sometimes an apology is a woman carrying plates without being asked. We ate under the oak. The food was plain: rice, beans, roasted pumpkin with butter and salt, cornbread, fried eggs from my hens, everything from that land, everything grown by these hands or these hands beside me. Susie ate with both hands, not from sloppiness, from joy. The joy of a child who has learned that the food is not going to run out. Maddie ate slow, as she always does, but her eyes moved around the table, taking everything in, absorbing everything with that total attention I have learned to recognize in her. At some point in the evening, when the conversation had gone low and the lantern was making soft shadow on the wall of the house, Susie came over to me. She climbed into my lap without asking permission. The way children climb with that total trust they have not yet learned the world will refuse. She sat facing the table. She looked at everyone. And she said in that small voice of hers, "I like it here." Nobody answered right away. I put my hand on her hair. I thought about everything that place had cost. The $12,000, the leftover of the badly divided inheritance, the lost sleep, the sore back, the cut hands, the missing pennies that was not there, the hurt of the siblings who did not call and then came and were sent home. Junie at the bottom of a well, waiting 37 years for someone to read.
When I was young,
Becca
I
on the other
chased
side of the
the
creek,
horizon.
the doubt that
Certain
had not
peace was waiting
and I thought
there.
that sometimes a
I
life
thought the
is
storms
made of
were
losses.
wrong turns taken.
We do not choose, and of
every
choices that
burden
try to
was
make up for
unfair.
those losses.
So I spent
Not by
years
erasing,
fighting the
because loss does not
mountains,
erase,
cursing
but by
every winding
raising
road.
something around it.
Never seeing that the struggle was
That
the
place
thing
was
that
that.
made
It
me
was not
grow.
a rich farm. It
The eagle
was not
learns within
It
the
was not a
wind.
pretty magazine
The oak grows strong
It was people who
beneath
had
the
lost
snow.
each
And
one
every soul
and who
that's
had found
worth
in the same
becoming
piece of
must
land a
walk
reason to
where
keep
harder paths may
There
go.
are folks who ask me now if I believe it was June
Was
that
never
told me.
meant to be
I don't know how to answer that.
easy.
I know I bought a place because I saw an old oak in a picture
The
and
waves
felt
were
something
not
I
there to
couldn't.
stop me.
I know a well
They were
covered
there
with
to teach
crosswise
me
caught my
how
attention
to
from the
last. Every
first. I know
trial
two
is
children
part
showed up
of
at my
the
gate with a
journey.
purpose they themselves
Every
never
scar
fully understood.
becomes
I
a
know a
guide.
purple flower grew
Mountain
where
is
no purple
not in
flower
my way. The
Was it
mountain is
June?
the reason for
Was
the
it
climb.
just coincidence and me the most common way? Couldn't it? Or was it the Lord's hand leading the way? I don't know. I have learned that not knowing is not true.
I've known loss that left me
What I know is that the
broken.
place
I've
everybody
known
called a
fear
mistake
that stole my breath.
It did
I've
not
known
cure.
nights so
Cure is too
cold
big
and
a word.
endless I could
I still
barely
wake up at 3
take
in the
one
morning
step.
thinking
Yet every wound
I still have days when
became
the
a
missing weighs
teacher.
so much.
Every
I sit under the
failure
rope and
left a mark, and every valley that
But
I
it gave me
walked
back
through
something
placed another star
The feeling
within
that what
the
I do
dark. The river
not to the world,
doesn't
not on
fight
anything,
the canyon, it learns to
just for
carve
man,
its way ahead. What seems a wall to those who
For Susie
fear
who
it
wants to
becomes a
keep
path
open
for those who tread. The
For
road
Becca
was
who has
never
a
meant
place
to be easy. The
For
storm
Jeff,
was never meant to pass. The waves were not there to stop me. They were there to teach me
Who broke
how to last. Every trial is part of the
sun is
journey. Every scar
light is the power of
becomes a
God.
guide.
It is
The
written
mountain
because
is not in my way.
The old
The
is
mountain
still
is the
long
reason for the climb.
down at the campfire.
For the climb. One day I stopped asking why me and started
Maddie is in the garden.
asking what can I learn the moment I embrace the
She's going to be
fire. The
something
fire
big someday.
lost
I
its
don't know
power to burn for
Becca
every
comes to supper
challenge
most nights.
holds a gift.
And I am
Though
sitting here
hidden
with this
from the
notebook
eye, the
and a pen in this rough
obstacle
hand of
and
mine,
destination
It's a story that maybe does not
will
really
never
worth trying to say.
separate all this.
It was
time.
real. It happened.
The road was never meant to be easy.
Because these stories do
Was
not end.
never
They
meant
keep
to
going.
end.
They change
The battles
days.
were not sent to
But it
break
was
me.
worth it.
They were
Every
sent to
crack in the
shape
wall.
the man
Every
I
night by
am.
candlelight.
Every trial is
Every
part
morning with
of
the
the journey.
Every fear I
Every
swallowed
loss
before doing it.
becomes alive. The mountain is not
there is
in
food
my
in it.
way. The mountain is the reason
There is
I
a
can
moon.
rise. So when the
There is a
thunder
small
finds
girl
me again,
who a few months ago
and dark clouds gather in the sky,
And there is
I'll greet them like
Eleanor
old
Wishful,
companions.
54 years old,
'Cause
weaver, woman
they
who got the leftover, who
belong
finally understood
to
that the leftover is not what remains when the good things are taken away. The leftover is what what stays sometimes is what matters most.